God, what an amazing evening so far. Clayton, wonderful, wonderful. Bill, wonderful. William, wonderful. God damn. And next, boys and girls, if you recall when we left last time, William Bonney once again got himself into a pickle. I will leave her name anonymous. And Peter ULLIAN, thrill us some more, sir.
Thank you. So before I pick up with Billy, I want to just real quick do sort of a coming attractions kind of thing for a news story I have, which is in the current issue of Frontier Tales magazine, an online journal, and it's in the October issue. You can read it now for free. It's called Dreaming of Pesach with the Last Bandito. And I'll just read you the historical note. Emil Harris, the main character, was a real person, one of the first policemen in frontier Los Angeles in the 1870s, and the only Jew on the force at the time. Some events depicted in the story really happened, others could have, some are purely imaginative. In all three cases, creative liberties have been taken. So I'm just going to read you a short excerpt from this to give you a little taste of it, and then you can go to frontiertalesmagazine.com and read it in its entirety, absolutely for free. We were in the hallway on the third floor outside the recently opened Grand Hotel Casa de Pico, the first of its kind in the Pueblo of Los Angeles. We were standing on either side of the door to room 31, behind which we had reason to believe we would find the bandit Three-Fingered Jack Dunleavy, possibly in the arms of one of our rare Los Angeles beauties. I stood to the right of the door, my Henry repeater in my right hand. My partner, George Guard, stood to the left, holding a Whitney 12-gauge. We both stood in the hallway in our stockinged feet, having left our boots in the lobby to minimize the possibility that the sound of our footfalls would alert our three-fingered quarry to our presence. I pantomimed my instruction that we drop low, as Three-Fingered Jack was known to make often reckless use of a pepper box pistol, which could often prove quite deadly, not to say wildly painful. We crouched on either side of the door, and I counted silently on my fingers. 1, 2, before I got to 3, the door exploded and pellets flew across the hall and above our heads and embedded themselves in the painting that hung across the hall, which depicted a vista of Los Angeles from 1859 from the vantage of Fort Hill, overlooking the Pueblo that at that time had contained just over 4,000 people. Now, in 1874, the city was much bigger. We had recently reached 6,000 residents, according to local officials. So that's just a little taste of Dreaming of Pesach with the Last Bandito. You can read it for free in its entirety on frontiertales.com. You can also vote for your favorite story from the October issue. And if that story should happen to be mine, I encourage you all to exercise your franchise. All right, when we left off with Billy the Kid, or William H. Bonney, not yet known as Billy the Kid, he's just 18, he has just killed his first man in self-defense, but it led him to being a fugitive, and he is hiding out with his distant cousins, the Salazars, in New Mexico on their ranch. However, the Horrell brothers are heading towards the ranch. The Horrells are notorious killers from Texas who are working for the Murphy Dolan outfit and murdering small Mexican ranchers and stealing their land for the Murphy Dolan clan. How are you going to handle this, Billy? Asked Hugo, my cousin. Well, maybe I can persuade them to leave off, I said. The Horrells ain't easily persuaded, Hugo said, and there's 5 of them. I put my hand on my pistols. But I got 2 pistols, 6 shots each, I said. Now, this was a great lot of bravado on my part. Until that point, although I had become adept at target practice and shooting tricks, Windy Cahill was still the only person I had ever shot. Even so, I persuaded the Salazars to remain indoors and allow me to greet the Horrells when they arrived. The brothers reined in their horses and took stock of me. I stood there with my friendly, crooked-toothed grin on my face. "Hello," I said. The Horrells looked me over. I didn't know which one were Mart, Tom, Merritt, Ben, or Sam. All five looked like a passel of mean cusses to me. "You ain't Mexican," the one in the middle said. I took him to be their leader. One thing the outlaw Jesse Evans had taught me when I rode with him and the boys was this: when outnumbered in a gunfight, always go for the man in charge first. That throws the rest of them off long enough for you to make your stand if you're lucky. "I'm an Irishman," I said. The one in the middle spat on the ground. "Where's the Mexicans?" I raised my eyebrow. "Which Mexicans?" I said. "The ones who live here," he said. "What's your business, if you don't mind my asking?" I said. "I do mind you asking," he said. "Mind my words and go get 'em." I looked them over. They were all of them big and mean, but I figured I was faster. "Why didn't you make me?" I said. The one in the middle stared at me. He went for his pistol. So did his four brothers. But I cleared leather first and I put a bullet through the middle one's forehead. The bullet punched out the back of his skull and I saw a burst of blood and brains mist into the air behind him, framed against the mountains in the distance. He slumped in his saddle and, just as Jesse Evans had told me would hopefully happen, the other four glanced at their fallen brother and leader, their pistols held in their hands but not pointing at anywhere in particular. This was all the edge I needed. I'd only just shot a man for the second time, and I was now about to shoot 4 more. I didn't think on it much though. I treated it just like target practice. I started on the outside right and left, my 1860 Army Colt pointed in one direction, my 1851 Navy Colt in the other, and raked my way in, firing shot after shot, cocking the hammers with my thumb, taking down each man in turn. Like I said, I am a good shot, and also probably the fastest at thumbing or fanning that there ever were, I guess. And all of them pitched from their horses and died before hitting the ground. Each of them shot through the breast. Texans are a tough breed. I don't dispute that. But some of them, if I may remark, are a little too impressed with their own toughness. And this makes them incautious and overly confident in their own abilities. As the echo of the shots faded in the valley, the Salazars slowly emerged from their adobe house, which had by now been my home for 6 weeks and change. They looked at me, standing there with smoke drifting from the barrels of my 6 guns, and looked at the dead Texans lying on the ground. "That's some pretty fancy shooting," Hugo said. "We better strip them bodies naked and feed them Texans to the pigs," I said, for it was a well-known fact that if you wanted to dispose of a body, one could do no better than having it devoured by a sty full of hungry pigs. "Billy," my Aunt Paula said, "you'd best make yourself scarce before the law comes sniffing around." Although it pained me to agree, I could not deny the logic of her argument. My brief return to the bosom of my family had ended, and I was soon enough on my own again. I rode one of the Horrell horses, leading the other 4 with me, to John Chisholm's nearby ranch, hoping I could sell the horses and secure enough cash to provide me means to lay low until the Horrell brothers were forgotten, as I suspected they might soon be. John Chisholm had the largest ranch in Lincoln County, a huge spread on the Pecos. That was about all I knew about him, but I was hoping he could use some extra horses. As it happened, when I arrived, expecting to see his foreman, maybe, if I were lucky, I saw the man himself. He was tall, with an impressive mustache, mostly gone to gray. Beside him, an employee, about my size, slim and powerful, stood with a Winchester resting on his shoulder. He had an even more impressive mustache, but one black as coal. His skin was dark from working in the sun, but I didn't take him for a Mexican. This was Billy Barlow, and this was the first time we laid eyes on each other. Two other men stood beside Chisholm. The first, I would learn, was Frank McNabb. The other, John Chisholm introduced to me as his brother, Frank Chisholm. Since Frank Chisholm was black, I wondered how exactly this had come to be, but I figured it were none of my affair. John Chisholm was in his 50s at this time, and McNabb only about 25. Frank Chisholm was perhaps in his middle 30s, Barlow about my age. I had just turned 18. Chisholm was nice enough when he greeted me, but things turned sour when he saw the brand on the horses. "Why," Chisholm said, "them horses got the Tunstall brand on them." I didn't know what that was, of course, not then. "Why," I said as innocently as I could manage, "so they do." "How come you're in possession of 4 Tunstall horses?" he asked suspiciously. This created a dilemma for how best to answer his query. I could not admit that I took the horses from 5 dead men I had killed myself, even if it were in self-defense. "Well now, that's a funny story," I said. "What's funny about it?" Chisholm replied, and I figured he was not the kind of man who enjoyed funny stories. I had no story in mind, funny or otherwise, and this would soon have been apparent had not, at that very moment, a rider thundered towards us from some distance atop an Appaloosa. We all caught sight of the Appaloosa simultaneous, and the sight caught all of our attention. "Here comes Sally riding that mare full out again," Chisholm said. "She sure can ride for a girl," Barlow remarked. "Hell, she sure can ride, period," Chisholm admitted. "If she were a little bigger, I'd have her roping calves." Sally, the girl atop the horse, reined in her mount when she reached us. I took a good look at her then, and what I saw was a most beauteous sight indeed. A girl about my age, with light brown hair and every bit as pretty as my former love, Bonnie, whom I had reluctantly left behind at Camp Grant. She wore a colorful shirt, and she also wore pants, something I had never seen on a woman outside the theater. "Sally," Chisholm admonished, "you ride them horses like there's no tomorrow. What are you in such a damn hurry for all the time?" "I like the feel of the wind in my face is all, Uncle John," she said. She had her light brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked at me and gave me such a smile, the like of which I don't think I ever previously known. "Whom do we have here? A new cowboy?" "He's too slight to be a cowboy," McNabb grumbled. "I can ride and rope with the best of them," I said. "Can you bring down a steer after you rope one, though?" Barlow asked. I didn't know, because I'd never tried. Most of my rustling had been horses. "You ain't no bigger than me," I said to Barlow. "In fact, I judge you to be about the same damn size. If you can do it, I can do it." "I'd have to see you do it first to judge the credibility of that statement," Frank Chisholm said. "Well, I'm good with horses," I said, changing the subject and indicating the one I rode and the 4 I led, "as you can well see." "You haven't told us where you got 5 of Tunstall's horses," Chisholm said. "I got them from under 5 horse thieves," I said, guessing. "They go by the name of the Horrell brothers." This stopped the conversation. 5 pairs of eyes looked at me, hard. "You took these horses from the Horrell brothers?" McNabb asked. "I figured they were stolen from Tunstall," I said, not knowing yet who Tunstall was, but trying to piece together a reasonable story to explain myself. "So I thought I'd return them." "Why you try to sell them to us then?" Frank Chisholm said. "Well, it's a long way to Tunstall," I said, not then knowing if Tunstall was a person or a place. "I thought you could return them for me." Barlow, McNabb, and Frank Chisholm looked at me like they didn't believe me. John Chisholm looked at me like he didn't either, but like he sort of liked my story all the same. "Where's the Horrell brothers now?" Chisholm asked. "Walking, I suppose," I said. I didn't want to admit I'd killed them until I had a clear idea of the situation. Chisholm liked that answer and laughed good and hard. Barlow didn't laugh, but spared me a smile. The others didn't even smile, except for Sally. Sally looked at me and beamed, making my heart melt. "Since you're such a good horseman," she said, "come riding with me." "I like that," I said. "I wouldn't," Chisholm said. "Sally, you don't know who this fellow is." "Who are you, cowboy?" Sally asked me. I thought it over. I didn't want to introduce myself by any of my known outlaw names, Henry Antrim or Kid Antrim. I thought of my mother's maiden name, Bonnie. I thought of how the fancy ladies had taken to calling me Bonnie Billy. I thought of Bonnie herself. I thought of the name I was born with, William Henry McCarty. "My name is William H. Bonney," I said. "Most folks call me Billy." "Hi, Billy. I'm Sally Chisholm," said Sally. Then she turned to her uncle. "See, I know who he is now." "That hardly qualifies," Barlow said quietly. I had the feeling he fancied Sally, or at least felt protectively towards her. "He could be a desperado for all we know," McNabb said. I had the feeling he fancied Sally too. "He doesn't look like a desperado," Sally said. "How you know what a desperado looks like?" Chisholm said. "I want a companion to go riding with," Sally insisted. "Wouldn't you feel better if I had a companion, Uncle?" "I shoot very well," I interrupted, "and would prove a most protective companion to your niece, Mr. Chisholm." "You return those damn horses to the Englishman," Chisholm said. "Then maybe we can talk." I figured the Englishman was Tunstall. So that was how I came to the town of Lincoln and met an Englishman named John Henry Tunstall. To be continued.
On bated breath and popcorn. It's so much fun. But can you imagine, like, everything is so Hollywood sanitized, how insanely violent the West was continually? I mean, the reason they would hang a horse thief, you didn't have your horse, you would die. I would imagine everyone carrying a gun, everyone was shooting. I mean, just ridiculous. And then you have the poor Indians in the mix, some who were actually quite savagely destructive, and others who fell into the rear end of the bus of Manifest Destiny. It's quite extraordinary. I still can't fathom the West, to tell you the truth.